Hello and a big warm welcome to this episode of the Soul Sync podcast. Now, today we're going to be talking about cancer to someone that's not just a survivor, he is a thriver. Now, I know nearly all of us have probably had some experience of cancer in our lifetime. Myself, I've lost 2 grandparents to it, and I've been through that pain watching them kind of wither away and really struggle with their battles against cancer. So I wanted to speak to Savio because I really found that his triumphant battle against stage 3 cancer and how he went about dealing with it once he had the diagnosis, seeking out more holistic treatments, I really found did blow me away. So Savio not only healed himself from cancer using alternative treatments, but this chapter in his life really sparked a massive power within him to empower others who are dealing with cancer. This led him on to become a TEDx speaker, a media journalist, a board-certified wellness coach, and a best-selling author. Through his diverse roles, Savio amplifies the voices of cancer survivors and ambitious leaders, guiding them towards a healthy, wealthy, and wise lifestyle. So today, Savio joins us to share his insights, wisdom, and unwavering spirit with us, the Soul Sync community. I really found this episode blew me away. I hope you enjoy it too. So Savio, firstly, a massive warm welcome to the Soul Sync podcast. It's great to have you on.
Jason, thank you so much for inviting me on. I'm excited.
Oh, I'm excited. So as I've just gone through in the intro, there's a lot there that I want to talk to you about. Firstly, can you share a bit about your background and how it has influenced to where you are today?
So I grew up as a very shy, introspective, sensitive kid. I was born in Mumbai, India, came to the United States when I was 3 years old. My parents are from a different part of India called Goa, which is ruled by the Portuguese for many, 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 many years. I grew up in a small little suburban town in New York. I went to the city for college in the big New York City, and I lived there for many, many years. And for the most part of my studies, it's been focused on IT, information systems, web producing, things of that nature. And then something dramatic happened in 2014, which is cancer. I was diagnosed with stage 3 cancer, and that led me to taking that pain that situation caused and turning it into some aspect of purpose where I can now guide other people towards just finding and sharing their stories, because I think that's the most important thing. Whatever we've been through, the stories is the aspect that no one can take away from us.
With your cancer diagnosis, talk through that, because I think that in itself is such a, how did it come about? How did you, because I'm sitting opposite you now and you look full of vitality. So
I appreciate that. Many people have told me the same thing. And I did a lot of work on myself because I think to a large part, cancer is a very physical situation. It's a physical disease. It's affecting you and robbing you of your vitality, your life, and it creates fear, anxiety, and not so good thoughts in general about where you see your life going. And so for me, cancer happened in 2014, July. Before the cancer, when I was told that I had cancer, I was on a trip with a friend to Paris, London, Amsterdam, and I started getting all these night sweats. And I thought maybe it's the travel, although I travel extensively. Came back, I had drenching night sweats as well. My stomach started getting distended, bigger and bigger. And at that point in my life, I was not even taking aspirin. I was seeing a naturopath who did a blood analysis work on me for about 10 years. And he said to me, Savio, what I see here, it could be 3 different things. So what I suggest you do is to go and get a sonogram. I'm like, sonogram? He's like, yeah. I'm like, okay. So I had to go get a sonogram, and they wouldn't let me out of the office. And then about an hour and a half later, they told me to get a family member to come pick me up and go to the hospital. I'm like, what are you talking about? And they're like, yeah, that's what we want you to do. I'm like, okay. So my dad comes by, go to the hospital, and literally within an hour, I was admitted to the 5th floor. And later that night,
goodness.
later that night, I was told by a nurse, or I heard nurses talking, that I would be transferred to the seventh floor, which they call the cancer floor. So that night I knew I had some semblance of cancer. I didn't know what kind, but I knew that that was where I was in.
Wow. I can't imagine you slept at all that night.
I didn't, and I'm not someone who, even though I'm sensitive, I'm not someone who, I might be English a little bit in the sense of like stiff upper lip and like, come on, let's just get through it. But I did remember breaking down to a nurse, and not because it wasn't really the fact that I had cancer and I could die, which is something that, of course, all of us think about. It was more about, I felt like I didn't complete what I came here to do as a soul, or I felt like I was going to disappoint myself and other people, that somehow I messed up. And so that was weighing heavily on me. The fact that I had responsibilities and burdens that I didn't feel like I took care of. So I remember breaking down with the nurse for about 3 or 4 minutes. And she just kept saying to me, listen, it is what it is, and you'll get through it.
So you went from that point, and how did you, stage 3 is, in my understanding, is that's very far along.
Yeah, it is. So after they transferred me to the seventh floor, that same day, I had to be given a nephrostomy tube in my abdomen, and the doctor is the one who whispered it in my ear and said to me, it's stage 3, it's DLBCL, diffuse large B-cell lymphoma. And he said to me, he's like, if there's a cancer to get, this is the cancer to get, which I thought was odd, but he did say that. And he mentioned that there's great treatment for what I have. So he just assured me. I was in the hospital for a total of 15 days, and 3 days before I was discharged, I was told to take my first round of chemo. So if you're asking me how I handled all that, beyond the fact that I've just always been a very independent-minded, like I like to challenge myself type of person, I also relied heavily on my own learning. So I grew up Catholic in a Catholic household, but in college in the 90s, I knew that for me, I had to explore other belief systems and modalities. So I was on a search, and I explored high and low comparative belief systems, from Buddhism to spiritualism to higher spiritualism, just so that I can understand life. So I really relied heavily on that. And right before the medical director told me I need to take my chemo, I said to her, "It's that serious?" And she said, "Yes." So I relied on a good friend who at the time was, for me, the wisest person I've ever known. And she said to me, "Are you sure you want to take chemo? Like, that ravages the good and the bad. Are you sure you want to do that?" And I'm telling you, Jason, it was like a flash came to me from this movie. I don't know if you've seen it, with Keanu Reeves. And I mention this story all the time because it's so important. And it was called Little Buddha. And he played Siddhartha. He played Little Buddha in the movie. And he was meditating with 2 other ascetics. And he overheard 2 individuals on a fishing boat. One was an older and then a younger person. And they had an instrument. And he told the person, the older individual told the person, if you hold the string too tight, it will snap. And if you hold it too slack, it won't play. The path is the middle way. And it was like a bolt of inspiration, that I realized, I can do chemo, but I can also do a whole bunch of integrated modalities. And that's what I chose to do. I took body autonomy, and I made the choice for myself. I had 6 rounds of chemo after I got out of the hospital. And in between those 3 weeks of cycles, I ended up doing high and low, a whole bunch of integrated modalities.
What is integrated modalities?
There's so many. So
I'm just trying to work. I want to know what it was, because it sounds like you had this. Even the fact that you straight away went there, what was it you did?
I used to call myself a very like a biohacker, someone who always looks for hacks on how to improve their life, their longevity, their health. And so I was a baby biohacker before cancer. Became full throttle biohacker. And so basically the modalities that I did were ozone therapy. I did red light therapy. I read the Quran. There's a passage about the black seed oil that's the only one thing that the black seed oil can't cure is death. I read spiritual text.
Right, let's go through these a bit slower because they're so good. I want to know.
Okay.
Just tell us a bit more about some of these things,
Okay.
because I've not heard of a lot of this, and I've heard of a lot of things, and some of the things you're saying I've not heard of.
Okay, so I have to preface this by saying I'm a board certified wellness coach here in the States. So I'm not
Yes.
advocating for anyone to try these things. I'm not telling people to do it. I'm just saying what worked for me. So I did something
Yes.
called ozone therapy. It's been used in Germany for over 60 years. Basically, they take an O3 gas. And so the way I had it administered to me was that they took a saline drip, put the O3 ozone gas inside the saline drip, and gave it to me as an IV. I did that 3 days a week in between the cycles of chemo. I did energy medicine, which, as you might know, is calling on higher energies or higher forces in order to heal oneself. I did something called the black seed oil. I put it in honey. I read that passage in the Quran that mentioned something about the black seed oil. So I did that. I did red light therapy, which is used really for mitochondrial growth, because when you have chemo, it does ravage the body. I lost my hair. Now I wear it as a badge of courage. I think for me, it saves me so much time. So I'm happy. Help me looks good. So I'm keeping it. I
think it looks very good. I could imagine you with hair now.
Thank you. I appreciate that. But I think it helps stave off so many of the side effects. I only had a little bit of neuropathy in my fingers and my toes. My appetite was fantastic. I was working out 6 days a week. I was doing spinning and strength training. And
was you a wellness coach? What was you doing prior to the cancer? Have you become a wellness coach afterwards?
Correct. I became a wellness coach afterwards. I realized that for me, after 5 years of being in remission, that I needed to do something with this experience. And for me, that's what inspired me, was to do that. Before that, I was doing IT, and I was also...
So just to go back, I just want to ask, so just because this is really interesting. So when you got the cancer diagnosis, your inclination was just to go research crazy, trying to, find all different therapies.
Yeah, I decided for me, after that inspiration that came to me from that movie that I did not watch since the 90s.
What's the movie called again?
It's called Little Buddha. And it's
I thought that was the character. I didn't realize that was the name of the movie.
Yeah, and it's starring Keanu Reeves. He plays the Buddha in the movie.
Okay.
And so I created a Google alert while I was in the hospital. I was bedridden for a week. I was in the hospital for 15 days, but the first week I was bedridden because of the nephrostomy tube. And I had my phone with me. I had Google, and I had Google alerts, and I wanted to learn everything about my situation. And so I decided, for me, the best path was what I call integrate, or what people call integrative, which is the best of both worlds: mainstream medicine and holistic medicine. It's a combination of the two. And for me, I just felt that I needed to throw the kitchen soup I need to create all in the kitchen soup, as they call it, which is to figure out for myself, what does healing actually mean, and how can I find a semblance of healing in my life?
What role do you feel that these kind of other therapies played? I don't know if you, obviously would you say that was a massive part of your healing?
So I can't say, so I don't know. And I don't think anyone can actually tell you, because I know people who've done chemo, it hasn't worked for them. I know people who've done radiation, it has not worked for them. I know people who've just done only holistic, it's worked for them, and have done holistic and has not worked for them. I can just say, for me, I was diagnosed July of 2014. I did 6 rounds of chemo. In between that, I did a whole bunch of integrated modalities. By the way, integrated modalities are not cheap. Insurance does not cover them. You have to pay out of pocket. But I said, if I'm not alive to enjoy what I have in my savings account, who cares? So I did what I needed to do in that regard. But I think it helped me from the side effects. It helped me. I had great appetite. I was alive. I had vitality. I wasn't working as much as I was before, because I wanted to focus solely on the healing aspect. But I think it also gave me the ability to overcome it quicker, because I was diagnosed in July 2014, and I was told December of 20th of the same year, 4.5 months later, that I was in remission. And this
Wow.
past December of 2023, it's been 9 years in remission. So,
wow. And it seems like your whole life has changed and evolved because of the cancer.
yeah. So if it was to tell me that I was going to do this, I got like a psychic reading from someone and they told me I was going to do this, I wouldn't believe them, because no one wants cancer foisted on them. No one would welcome that. But it happened. And I'm someone who firmly believes, after going through the cancer journey myself, and at this point, I've interviewed 200 cancer survivors. I'm a journalist. I've had an interview series. That interview series turned into a best-selling book. After interviewing them, there's a commonality. And the commonality is we can't choose the horrible things that happen to us, but we can choose how we respond to it. And we can choose how we see meaning in what has happened to us. And so I decided to take both of those and create something from it. And I feel very privileged to do the work that I do.
Talk to us about the work that you do current day, because I've watched some of your videos are really, really interesting. And your TED talk was very interesting as well. Tell us about what you do at the moment.
Sure. So I waited 5 years for remission to do anything with this aspect, because after 5 years, they don't guarantee that cancer will never come back. They just say it's less likely to occur. So I wanted that reassurance. So after 5 years, I decided, well, what am I going to do? And I realized that I just love this idea of seeing cancer survivors like myself find purpose in that horrible stuff that's happened to them. And so as a writer, pitched an idea to my editor. He thought of a great idea for an interview series called I Survived Cancer. Here is how I did it. At that point in time, I interviewed 175 cancer survivors. To date, I've interviewed 200 cancer survivors. But at the time, about a year and a half ago, he then urged me to turn that interview series that I did into a book. And that book became a best-selling book where I took 35 of their stories and told my own story. So not only am I recently a TEDx speaker, the talk is called 7 Minutes to Wellness, How to Love Your Inner Stranger. And people ask me all the time, what do you mean by that? Because it's such an intriguing title. And I told them it originated from me being in the hospital, because I saw the physical body, Savio, as the stranger, the one that's dying. But this other part of me, the emotional aspect of me, the relational aspect of me, the mental aspect of me, I was like completely there, but still wanted to live and still wanted to thrive. And that's where the origin story came for the stranger. And I pitched it as an idea for TEDx, and they accepted me this past October of 2023, and it became live at the end of December of 2023. And so beyond that, I'm also a board-certified wellness coach, like I mentioned. I only coach cancer survivors really on how to turn their story into something greater than what has happened to them. So how to create some type of business from it, or how to leverage that pain into a platform of some kind to inspire other people, to tell their story, and to engage with other people in a meaningful way.
Your story is just absolutely incredible. You know, what you've been through to then go on to do, and then to not just, to then go on and help so many people as well. What would you say is key advice to people who get a cancer diagnosis? What have you learned from all of this experience? Because you've been immersed in it.
Yeah. I've gleaned a lot of data and a lot of hidden meaning from people's encounters and people's overcoming of cancer. Namely, let me first start with people that were featured in my book and my interview series. A large portion of the connections that most of them made was this idea that cancer is not a death sentence, that there's a way to overcome it. There's a way through it, but the only way through something is by going literally through it, like having to feel the discomfort in it, not avoiding it, not pretending, and also to have just a great care team around you to just make sure that you're comfortable in their administered of care and how they want to go about doing that, and whether or not they're listening to you. And I think a large portion of all this is also this idea of hope. A large portion of them had hope. like that even though it was going to be rough, that they would make it through. And I have to talk about this one person in the book who had pancreatic cancer. He was told he had a 2 to 4% chance of living, and he was a finance guy. And he says, why can't I be part of the 2 to 4%? Why do I have to be part of the 96 or 98% that don't make it? He's still alive. And another individual I featured in my book, he's a Hollywood voice actor named Rob Paulson. And he had throat cancer, which not only, it was a double whammy because loved what he was doing with his voice. But he survived it. He's still working in Hollywood. He says food is no longer an enjoyable item for him, but he just eats to stay alive, but he still works, and he still does the best he can with what life has, dealt him.
Mm.
And then
sorry, carry on. Please do carry on.
No, and I think the other portion of the individuals that I coach, so cancer survivors that I coach, is really this idea that you own your story and you can amplify that story or that impact in so many ways that you can't even imagine. And I'm just showing people that what I've done with my own life in terms of all the successes that I've garnered was as a result of believing in myself and feeling like I can create something out of this that can sustain me, not only emotionally, but also in my day-to-day and in my life.
That's really interesting. You mentioned earlier on that you've kind of researched lots of different spiritual religions, practices, spirituality. What's your sort of belief system or spiritual practice? Where are you? Where are you in your mind? Because you seem very, very wise.
So I appreciate that. Thank you. I would say I'm always open and aware, but I have studied practical spiritualism. I've studied things like Blavatsky, Manly P. Hall, all the way to the modern spiritual thinkers of our time, like Deepak Chopra and Marianne Williamson. And I do find, so my parents are devout Catholics. I do find that rearing was good for me. I was an altar boy. I went to a Catholic elementary school for 8 years. I was an altar boy for about 6 of those years. I think that gave me a good structure. So I'm a firm believer in 2 things. One, living by the code of, the golden rule. Do unto others as you would want to do unto yourself. But I also live by this aspect of feeling like information and wisdom can be gleaned and garnered anywhere. And to reject any bit of truth is to reject the totality of truth, because truth is changing. It does evolve and does change to circumstance. Now, I don't mean like the basic truths should still remain. You shouldn't do crazy things. Yes. But in terms of figuring out for yourself where wisdom lies, that's where wisdom lies, is that you're constantly, as a good friend once said, polishing the facets of your character. And whatever that form or that aspect takes, then so be it. So for me, cancer was a great wake-up call because it helped me polish a different facet of the human experience that I never thought I would ever have to experience. But I did. I've somehow made it through, and hopefully I'm still alive to do the best work that I can do in helping others realize that truth as well.
Honestly, I have absolutely loved hearing your story, and I think it's absolutely fascinating. And I think that, I think a lot of people, I think you really probably helped more people than you probably realize, in the message that you're spreading, because, there's a couple of cancer, I think we all know people going through it, and it really feels like the end of the world to someone when that happens. And I can't even imagine what that must feel like. And do you have a final thought, or I always ask guests this, and I do have a habit of putting people on the spot, but do you have a final thought or pearl of wisdom or something that you'd like to leave us on today?
I would say if your listeners and viewers can watch my TEDx talk, because I talk about a little framework of mine called the Aloha Reboot. And it's part of the 7 minutes to wellness, which is A, stands for acknowledge. So acknowledge where you are in the present moment. L stands for listening. Listen to that inner voice that's inside of you. O, very important. O stands for opening yourself up to self-compassion and self-forgiveness. H stands for harnessing all that you've accumulated in that and being kind to yourself. And A is really acting on that purpose. And I made it 7 minutes, and I made it an acronym because I wanted people to really latch on to this idea that we can call forth those things within ourselves. It doesn't have to be this nebulous thing. It doesn't have to be I'm meditating for 10 minutes in lotus position. It could just be as simple as taking 2 to 3 breaths and coming to center, coming to yourself. And a large portion of what I preach is really this idea that to know thyself is to heal thyself, because that's the only way that we can. Doctors are great in what they do. They're very physically focused. They themselves administer the drugs and the treatments, but they don't know the end result. No one knows, because it's up to a higher power that's greater than ourselves. But we can take responsibility for the other aspects, the emotional, the mental, the spiritual, the relational, our dreams, things of that nature. And I think that's very important for people to realize that you can own that power. That power is available to you. Because a large portion of what I also talk about is the fact that, doctors can give you that information. A lot of people see them as like the Wizard of Oz, like the great and powerful.
Yeah.
But they themselves don't really know at the end of the day. We're all trying to figure it out. So rely on their care, but know that you have the power to own your story, and you have the power to create from that story, because hope is always available to us. It's never a one-shot deal.
I love your energy. If you do want to find out more about Savio, all the links will just be in the show notes. You can watch his TED Talk. I'll put it all there, so don't worry. Nice and easy. Savio, honestly, I've really enjoyed talking to you. You've given me a nice boost of positivity on probably the first warm, sunny day in England that we've had this year. Your energy combined with the sun. What more could I want on a Friday night? Thank you.
Thank you so much. And if anyone wants to find out information about me, they can go to my website, Savio P. Clemente, CLEMENTE.com. And on social media, I'm at thehumanresolve.com. I have a newsletter. They can watch my TEDx talk, and they can find out other information about me.
Well, there we go. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks.
Well, there we go. Wasn't that just an interesting conversation with the amazing Savio? What he's gone on to do to help countless people dealing with cancer, with their own struggles, I just found to be so inspirational. I think it's worth saying that if you are currently being affected by cancer, or you've had a loved one close to you, or a friend or family member who had their own cancer battles, I really do suggest that you talk to someone. There are a range of charities out there and grief groups. So I would just do some Googling and have a look into that. I will also put in the show notes some charities that may be able to help you. If you want to find out more about my YouTube channel, there's lots of videos on there about my personal experiences, battles that I've heard, lessons that I've learned. Just go to the show notes where you'll find the details of that, along with my other socials. This is the Soul Sync Podcast. I'm Jason Paul, and until next time, much love, keep safe, goodbye.